Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 9th lecture of the Geo Lecture Series for 2024. This is brought to you by the Philippine Geographical Society in partnership with the UP Department of Geography. I am Yani Lopez, and I will be your moderator for this lecture. Now, just a few reminders before we proceed. Kindly keep your microphones on mute during the presentation. And we highly encourage you to interact by typing your comments and questions in the chat box, and they will be addressed during the open forum. Also, please note that this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be made available for viewing after the event through the Department of Geography YouTube channel. Okay, so to formally begin our program for this afternoon, please welcome Emmanuel B. Garcia, the President of the Philippine Geographical Society, to give us an opening remarks.
Thank you, Ma'am Yani. A pleasant afternoon to everyone. Welcome to our 9th Geo Lecture for 2024. The Geo Lecture Series is a space that endeavors to bring together scholars, practitioners, and civil society to present research and advocacy work within a larger geographical context and understanding. This is brought to us by the Philippine Geographical Society and the UP Department of Geography. For this afternoon's lecture, our invited speaker will deliver his paper that finds the connections of human and non-human actants, which gave rise to remote field instruction social phenomena. It is quite interesting to contextualize this, and as is our tradition, we generated the word cloud from your generation keywords. Dominant words include online, technology, distance, learning, virtual Zoom, asynchronous, but there are also other words including reliability, internet, lacking, uncontrolled, autonomous, and the one that stand out, heartbreaking. And so without further ado, again, it will be interesting to see how this all ties up to this afternoon's lecture. And so on behalf of the Philippine Geographical Society and the UP Department of Geography, welcome to our 9th Geo Lecture Series for 2024.
Thank you, Sir Eman. So our speaker for this afternoon is Elijah Jesse Pine. He is Assistant Professor and Chair of the Department of Educational Communication, College of Development Communication, UP Los Baños. He obtained his BS degree in Development Communication in UPLB in 2015 and his MA degree in Anthropology in 2023. He has previously done research on educational communication, field education, and learning during the pandemic. In December 2023, he co-published a monograph titled Development Communication in Emergency Remote Teaching during the COVID-19 Pandemic, Challenges, Adaptation, and Reimagination, along with his colleagues at DEC. His current research and public service involvements focus on developing educational material or media to achieve reading literacy outcomes. So everyone, let us all welcome EJ Pine.
Thank you very much po, Ma'am Yani, for the kind introduction. Unang-una sa lahat po, nagpapasalamat ako sa lahat ng participants dito sa Zoom event natin this afternoon. I know it's a Friday afternoon and probably iniisip ninyo na magbabakasyon kayo o kaya spend time with family and friends, but I'm very thankful that you chose to be here, to be present in this lecture and listen dun sa i-share ko sa inyo later the results ng aking research. At the same time, I would like to thank the UP Department of Geography for inviting me, especially po kay Dr. Joseph Palis for being able to invite me to this event, as well as to the Philippine Geographical Society sa pag-organize po nito. So ako po si Elijah Jesse M. Pine, but you can call me EJ. I am an assistant professor and currently the chair at the Department of Education and Communication, College of DevCom in UPLB. And I would like to share with you this talk or this lecture titled A Depth Deficit, Rapport Building and Remote Field Instruction in University Classes During the COVID-19 Pandemic. So just a background about this research. This actually is a portion of my master's degree research last year. Basically, dun sa thesis ko, inaral ko kung ano nga ba ang naging experience ng mga faculty and students sa isang klase that was supposed to be conducted in person, face-to-face, yung kailangan nag-fieldwork sila, but we're not able to do so because of the pandemic. I'm sure this is a topic that also resonates with students and faculty members from the field of geography kasi in the literature that I was also reading as part of my research, marami din talagang nag-transition na na teachers and classes and students ng geography to remote field instruction during the pandemic. Yeah. So before I start this lecture, I want to start on a light note. No? So kanina may word cloud tayo and I really love kung papaano nito na reflect yung general natin na sentiment about doing remote field instruction. But I'd like to kind of move away from the negative, parang negative sentiment or emotion natin kanina and ask everyone about what excites us about doing fieldwork. I'm sure itong ating crowd this afternoon might probably be a blend of individuals from both geography and development communication, which is my own discipline. And I think yung nexus kasi natin is yung field work, di ba? Yung working closely with communities and people. So I'd like to ask you, no, baka pwede natin i-reflect doon sa chat. What excites you about fieldwork? It can be just a phrase, a word, pero saan ka na-excite, no, kapag narinig mo from your prof or from your colleague na mag-fieldwork tayo today? Sige, abangan ko muna ang inyong. I'll give you siguro a minute to think about your answer and then reflect dun sa ating chat. What excites you about fieldwork? Sige, so papangunahan ko na po no, habang naghihintay tayo. Ako personally, since ang aking pinanggagalingang fields at development communication and anthropology, I really love exploring people's perspectives from the field. Sometimes tayo sa ating sariling thoughts in our echo chambers, no, probably in school or with our friends, but it's always nice pag nag-fieldwork kasi nakakakuha ka ng ibang perspective on things, no, from other people. So based dun sa ating chat, no, meron tayong terms like exploration, being grounded, adventure, applied geography methods, interaction with other people, immersion, experience, meeting people from the community. So very positive, no? Ito yung mga bagay that really excites us when we're doing fieldwork. But if we remember, no, a few years ago at the start of the pandemic, ito yung mga bagay na naputol, no? We were shut off from feeling this excitement precisely because we had to resort to doing things remotely at the beginning of the pandemic. So na-miss natin yun. No? I can only imagine if you're a faculty member, a scholar halimbawa, who has spent half their lives sa pagtuturo sa mga bata through bringing them to communities, to interact with communities, learn about their issues. I can only imagine kung paano ka na-disheartened no, nung pandemic where you were really forced to do all of these things through Zoom spaces which have been proven to be impersonal, no? And parang you're just speaking to avoid most of the time. I know we all feel that way. And so I'd like to start this presentation with that. No? What exactly is field instruction? At papaano siya nabago noong nag-start yung COVID-19? So yan, sige po, just keep the answers coming, no? Maganda yan, nakakapag-share tayo ng thoughts and insights about field instruction. So basically, no, in a nutshell, when we say field instruction, it's an approach to learning na kung saan inaalaw mo yung learners, yung students mo, to participate in real-world community or organization settings para doon nila ma-apply yung kanilang mga natututunan from the four corners of the classroom. If we actually survey yung mga curriculum no, ng mga disciplines or programs na nag-offer ng field instruction components in their courses, mostly ito ay nasa middle hanggang dulo na part ng curriculum because the assumption is that the student has already learned all the theoretical information from previous courses. It's now time to apply them to an actual field situation. No? At ang paniniwala ng field instruction is yung learner mas nakaka-develop siya ng kanyang professional skills, particularly for college students, kapag siya ay nabigyan ng opportunity to personally experience these concepts and theories themselves. Ayan. So, I'd like to show you this slide kasi one of the questions of my panelists last time when I was doing my thesis was, ano ba talaga yung term na ginagamit natin to refer to this phenomenon, to field instruction? Kasi ang daming posible, no? And I took that comment, that suggestion to heart and actually did research about how it's called. And what I learned was, it would really depend kung ano yung tradition noong field or discipline kung saan nanggagaling ang isang scholar. But the borders no between them are quite porous. Hindi naman sila talaga completely separate or different from each other. So I learned that you call field instruction sometimes fieldwork or field education, practice learning, service learning. No, I think ito yung pinaka ginagamit sa NSTP classes natin, no, yung term na service learning, and then you have community-based learning. At the same time, when referring to the group na nagko-conduct ng field work, some universities call them field class, others call them field course. You call them field school sometimes, but mostly this is in the context of anthropology education, like sa Ateneo de Manila and here also in UP Diliman. And then from the College of Social Work and Development, they call it field-based class. No? They have a field instruction program as well. So like I said, quite porous yung boundaries nitong mga terms na ito. So for the purpose of consistency, I'd like to use the term remote or field-based class, adopting from the vocabulary of UP CSWCD. And then I'll explain later no, kung ano yung naging modifications natin along the way when we talk about field instruction during the pandemic. I included Shakespeare here kasi di ba sinasabi na what's in a name, that which we call a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. So it basically means that what's more important is how you're doing it and not necessarily the term that you are adopting. But regardless no, of these many disparate terms that we use to refer to field instruction, meron silang mga common qualities according to literature. So sinasabi na ang isang field instruction activity or program must be able to meet the following criteria. So una, it should provide opportunities for the learners to link theory to practice. Padalawa, dapat ma-expose daw ang isang learner to ethically challenging real-life learning situations. So, ibig sabihin nito, when you're in the field, sometimes you get to encounter cases, no, na parang, uy, di ko to naaral, ha? Di ko to nabasa, di ko naturo sa akin ni ma'am. But that's the point of field instruction, for you to have the opportunity to weigh these things out on your own, and then later on, reflect with your prof. Ito po yung na-experience ko, did I do the right thing or not? And then it's one for the books already kasi lesson mo siya for yourself as well as for future generations of students taking that course. Number 3, it creates avenues for optimal skill practice. So you may psychomotor component yung field instruction because especially in the field halimbawa of sa amin, sa development communication, natututo yung mga students to really practice communication skills in producing communication media when they are partnered with a community or organization. And then lastly, explore a mutual benefit between these learners, educational institutions, and communities. So dapat ay na-outweigh ng mga risks na nabanggit ko in number 2, yung mga benefits na nakukuha ng lahat ng partners. Okay, so ang word na field instruction actually ay nanggaling sa social work. No? It is considered as the signature pedagogy of social work, particularly in the United States. However, in-adopt din siya ng ibang scholars from other disciplines. So as you can see, ito yung iba't ibang disciplines or domains na ginagamit na rin yung term na field instruction sa kanilang vocabulary. So we have teacher education, ecology and forestry education, geography education, and even development communication education. At the College of DevCom, so kanina nabanggit ko sa inyo kanina kung paano kinoconduct yung field instruction ng aming students. But we have a committee at our college na responsible for nurturing these ties between the college and communities so that if the communities need the communication services na kayang i-offer ng aming classes, nililink namin yung classes doon sa mga organizations. So, I'd like to highlight this part, no? Kasi in any qualitative research, you always get asked, ano yung stake mo dito as a researcher? So, like I mentioned, ako ay nagtuturo sa College of DevCom, and ever since I started teaching in 2015, I have been handling field-based classes already. Now, normally, ang field-based classes in DevCom happens this way. You have, at the beginning of the semester, the teacher or pwedeng yung Academic Field Instruction Committee ay nagre-recommend ng isang community or site na may pangangailangan, specific communication-related needs. And then they are referred to the class, and then the class conducts initial fieldwork, they do yung pakikipagpalagayang loob, sila ay nag-surveys, nakikipagkwentuhan, nag-interviews. And then from that kind of research or data gathering, mas nasosolidify kung ano yung output na gagawin ng mga bata na kailangan ng community. So, does the community need, halimbawa, a learning material? Do they need, halimbawa, certain like media, halimbawa, that will allow them to learn a particular topic? Kailangan ba nila ng mga videos? Kailangan ba nila ng newspapers, etc.? Yun yung gagawin ng mga students for the duration of the semester. And then by the end of the semester, mag-evaluate ng outputs and then ito turn over eventually doon sa community. Now, like I mentioned, all of this shifted nung COVID-19 because we cannot do field work because of the limitations set by both the university and the IATF. Naalala nyo pa ba yung term na IATF? So because of that, tayo ay na-limit to remote mode, remotely coordinating with partner agencies and communities, which proved to be quite difficult in terms of sustaining communication kasi meron ding mga concerns, no? Meron ding mga bagay na pinagkakaabalahan yung community, especially during the pandemic, that caused those kinds of delays in communication. So mahirap talaga. And I grew curious about how then did classes adapt to this new mode of field instruction. Na short-change ba yung mga estudyante? Na short-change ba yung community? Or was everything just functioning as it is? So I'll be discussing more of that later. Yan. Hindi ko na papasadaan masyado tong review of related literature. No? But basically what was mentioned here is ang daming universities all across the world na nag-adapt talaga ng remote field instruction. They used, sabi dito, no, they turned to using electronic devices and the internet to be able to bridge yung kanilang mga classes at saka yung mga community partners para hindi naman maramdaman ng mga bata, no, ng mga students na hindi na sila nakakapag-field work. Parang may semblance pa din of coordinating with partners, but everything had to be done remotely to ensure health protocols. Okay. However, kahit ginawa ito, may concession pa din na hindi siya enough. No? It was very much limiting for the students' learning and it was no substitute for actual field-based instruction. The beauty in actual field-based instruction, pag nasa field ka, di ba, is yung pagkakaroon ng unexpected, uncertain, unstructured learning events that stimulate your students and the teachers' learning and imagination. And eventually, di ba, parang pag-uusapan nyo yun, pagbalik nyo sa classroom. It becomes a telling story that you can share not only with the people who weren't there, but also future generations of students and even family. Yun yung nawawala, no, nung nag-shift tayo lahat to remote. Now, in order to analyze remote field instruction during the pandemic, I had to seek the help of a theoretical guide. Because this is a research output, I'll walk you through the research framework or the theoretical framework that I used for my research. Now, If it gets a little too technical or too theoretical, just let me know, no? Stay with me. Pero I tried my best, no, para din, kasi I understand not everyone here ay nag-take na ng research course before. So at least para ma-appreciate natin yung theory, I tried my best not to simplify some of the more complicated terms. So ang ginamit ko ay actor network theory, right? And basically, the actor network theory is an approach to studying social phenomena wherein tinitingnan mo yung mga relationships ng iba't ibang entities that have brought about or given birth to that phenomenon. So for example, yung phenomenon mo ay learning, no? Learning yung gusto mong aralin, you will trace pabalik kung ano yung mga entities that are interacting with each other that produced learning as a phenomenon in the classroom, no? So simply put, that's what the actor network theory is. Now, ang actor network theory, very granular siya, no? It wants you to really pay attention, conduct slow observations of how phenomena unfold kasi ayaw niya ng parang lazy explanations and generalizations about social events. Ang tingin niya sa isang social phenomenon is distinct. Okay? So, yung learning halimbawa that happens here in this very Zoom event is a distinct one that you cannot apply to another learning event. No? And in order to fully explain the learning that happens here, kailangan i-trace natin yung network of different entities that bring about this Zoom event. Parang ganon sinasabi. Now, there is an entire subset of research in education studies na gumagamit ng ANT. Basically, it's called ANTs, no? ANT and education studies. And like I said earlier, no, kung ang tinitingnan mo na social phenomenon is learning, halimbawa, learning in a classroom, tinitingnan mo yung iba't ibang actors and entities that are responsible for that. They can be the teacher, no? They can be the classroom, the curriculum, the exams, the building, the armchair of the student. All of that have to be considered when you want to describe how a social phenomenon happens. So kung ang phenomenon mo ay bumagsak ang isang estudyante, no, hindi ka mag-explain away very simplistically na hindi lang siya nag-aral. If you look at it from an ANT perspective, titingnan mo, you trace back ano yung mga factors and actors that have been interacting para hindi siya makapasa dun sa exam na yon. Probably halimbawa on the side of the student, siya ay working student or meron siyang iniintinding family problem, no? Part sila nung network na yon. Halimbawa yung exam, medyo yung prof hindi siya nasa right mood when creating that exam dahil meron din siyang personal na problem, etc. Kaya medyo naghumirap yung exam. That can also be an actor or a part of the entities that comprise yung phenomenon ng pagbagsak ng estudyante doon sa isang exam. So ganun siya ka-granular, no? When looking at things. Now, ano yung mga konsepto sa actor network theory, you might ask? First concept I'd like to highlight is translation. Okay. So when we say translation, like I mentioned, sa isang network may actors, may entities. Translation means ano yung nangyayari between two entities. No? One entity performs an action to another entity. And when that happens, they are translated. Okay? So ibig sabihin sila daw ay nag-iibang, hindi naman nag-iibang anyo, no? But they become something else that they were not before. That is translation under the actor network theory. Now, to drive this home, I have this example. Paano nangyayari yung translation dito? So, what do you see? You see a projector and then a coaster. One example of translation would be, pag yung prof, halimbawa, pumunta siya sa class, tapos may dala siyang coffee, may dala siyang coaster, pinatong niya dun sa table yung coaster muna and then yung coffee. Ngayon, maglilipat siya ng slides, halimbawa, lilipat siya dun sa quiz slide niya. So tatakpan niya temporarily yung projector. Pero walang cap yung projector. So ang ginawa ng prof, kinuha niya yung coaster Tapos yun yung pinangharang niya dun sa projector. That is an act of translation. Because one thing acts upon another thing and translates it. Binabago niya, no? Nag-change. So yung coaster, hindi na lang siya lalagyan or patungan ng isang baso, but because of the action exerted by the prof towards the coaster, and because it was linked to the projector, naging cap ngayon yung coaster. Translation. It became something else. So later on, I'll discuss dun sa results of my research. Ano ba yung mga translation na nangyari along the way in remote field instruction? Next would be entities, actors and actors. So in the actor network theory, basically, tinitingnan mo ang mga bagay in terms of actors and actors. Kaya nga siya actor network theory. Actors are the ones, think of them as the doers of the action. Diba? And then the actants are the receivers of the action. So in the case of this one, the actor would be the prof, and then the receiver of the action would be the coaster. Diba? But also, pwede mo rin tingnan yung projector as the actor, tapos yung actant would be the coaster. Kasi yung projector ay nag-force ng kanyang function, supposedly, doon sa coaster. Okay? So, series of actors and actants yan that build that network, that build an assemblage. So, an example of actors and actants is this. Actually, ang sinasabi ng ANP, hindi lang tao ang actors, di ba? Pag sinabing actors, ibig sabihin, it can be any entity that directs action or forces, compels another entity to do something. Diba? So in this case, halimbawa, a class schedule is an actor that directs the action of students and teachers who are the actants. Kasi sila yung receivers ng actions. You cannot say that you're in control of your class schedule. It's the other way around. Your class schedule controls you. Diba? And that's why, pagdating halimbawa ng 8 a.m. ng Monday, you stop being a regular government employee of UP, you start being a teacher, you are translated into a teacher because the class schedule dictates so. Diba? After ng class, pwede ka ng regular teacher, a regular UP employee ulit, unless meron kang 10 to 11:30 na class. Diba? So that's entity. Assemblage basically means yung connections and links nitong iba't ibang actors and actants who are constantly translating each other. And then last would be generalized symmetry. When we say generalized symmetry, ito yung hindi nagdi-discriminate si ANP kung ano ang actor at kung ano, kung ano ang nature ng actor. You can be a non-human and still be an actor because you can direct the action of humans. On the other hand, pwede ka namang human na mag-direct din ng action ng isang non-human. Symmetry means you're not discriminating between humans and non-humans. They can both have agency, exercise the same degree of action towards one another. Okay. So to explain the methodology I had in this research, I did virtual and on-site ethnography for a couple of months from April to November 2022. Basically, I observed two classes in UPLB. No? Ang kanilang tinitake ay multimedia production class, and they had to produce outputs such as community newspapers and community TV episodes, radio episodes, all in one semester. They do that in groups as a class, but this was in 2022. So they were all working remotely. Wala pang nag-face-to-face na sa UPLB na DevCom students. They were all in separate parts of the Philippines. Diba? So paano kaya? Paano nangyari? So I'd like to discuss a couple of my interesting findings from this research. First is remote field instruction, right? Yun yung nangyayari. I learned from my research that the concept of the field quite expanded when we shifted to doing it remotely. How so? Because of the virtual tools that students and faculty members had, it opened up opportunities for them to reach people and places that they would never have imagined they will reach. Because before the pandemic, everything was done in person. Diba? Pag magko-community newspaper task ka, dun ka lang sa community na yun. Pwede kang probably umalis ng Los Baños, lumipat ng ibang bayan, but the fact stands that you work in a geographic community. However, during the pandemic, what happened was lumawak yung konsepto ng field because everyone was working in different parts of the Philippines. So one of the students here said, mas malaki yung sakop na na-reach nila dahil nakakapag-interview sila ng kahit taga Batangas because of their virtual tools like Zoom, like messenger calls. And they said that it was different compared to when they were doing it in person, face-to-face, kasi sabi niya mas madali yung correspondence, hindi kailangang laging puntahan, pero if you have follow-up questions, pwede mong i-email tapos sasagot naman sila dun sa email. So ang lawak, di ba? Lumalawak yung scope. So when the pandemic hit, the field suddenly did not become a space anymore. It was actually more of an activity, doing the field, doing field work, rather than the field as an actual area. It seems that the field was not seen in terms of physical proximity anymore, but rather yung ability ng isang student na gamitin yung virtual tools na meron siya to get in touch with stakeholders. That's what the field meant during the COVID-19 pandemic. When you were doing field work, it wasn't really, on the ground, in-person work. It was coordinating remotely. In a way, translation, di ba? Translation, as mentioned earlier. Now, some of the classes, ang ginawa naman nila, because they were all working remotely, what they did was to create special article issues. That means that if you're writing for a community paper in Los Baños, yung article na ipapasa mo ay isang storya from your own community. So, halimbawa, kataga Catanduanes ka, ganyan, may kwento ka doon that people in LB might find relevant, pwede mo pa rin siyang ikwento doon sa community paper sa Los Baños. So, they did that, a special pandemic series. And what this tells us is the term community in community media suddenly became a loose term as well. It didn't mean the immediate geographic community such as Los Baños, but it meant a more imagined community na kung saan even people from other locations can participate as long as they experience the same concerns with people in Los Baños. So, lumawak yung konsepto natin ng field at ng community. However, meron tayong drawback doon. Because lumawak yung konsepto natin of what field means and who our field stakeholders are, nagkaroon ngayon ng tinatawag natin na depth deficit. And that means, while dumadami yung nakaka-coordinate mo, dumarami, lumalawak yung nakakausap mo, because also of virtual tools, hindi natin nasusustain yung degree of rapport with stakeholders that we would have otherwise done if things were done in face-to-face. So lumabas din siya na result din sa research ko. For one, kaya hindi natin masustain yung ating rapport with stakeholders was because of virtual correspondence. It tends to experience what we call a buffer. So meaning, magsasend ka ng email sa isang stakeholder, a resource person, as a student, maghihintay ka ng ilang days bago sila mag-reply. Swerte mo na kung may ilang araw yon, pero some take weeks to even respond. And then after nun, may buffer time pa din before makareply si student because things are not happening synchronously. Unlike kung nasa physical face-to-face setup ka na yung pag-uusap nyo, coordination mo with the stakeholder, with the resource person is much easier. Because you didn't have all that trouble of communicating remotely with them. Ngayon, I don't want to put yung ating mga stakeholders in a bad light kasi there is a reason kung bakit din hindi sila makasagot agad. Take note that the context of the research is the pandemic. So, nung pandemic, nag-double yung workload ng lahat, di ba? Teachers, students, and even our stakeholders. So, we had to exercise and also give them some grace kasi hindi madali yung naging transition din ng stakeholders namin nung pandemic. Kung ang iyong stakeholder halimbawa isang barangay LGU, ang dami nilang iniintindi na protocols, diba, nung pandemic. And it's so hard to expect an immediate response because of that. Now, what I realized from that experience is kaya may delay minsan sa communication. One reason would be yung virtual tools natin, but also because students, yung classes natin, and yung ating partner communities do not obey the same logic. We do not obey the same temporal and occupational logics. Ang ibig sabihin ko doon ay, as a class, ang iyong mindset, ang atake mo, ika nga, sa isang exercise is weekly, di ba? Dapat ma-accomplish ko to by the end of the week kasi may panibagong exercise next week. Or you think in terms of deadlines, you think in terms of semesters. Our field partners do not think that way. They think in terms of the logic of the work they are in, di ba? So kung barangay LGU ito, hindi semester ang kanilang takbo, di ba? Pang sa atin yun sa university. Ang takbo nila ay term, di ba? Kapag halimbawa school, ang kapartner mo, like a basic, like halimbawa an elementary school, yung kapartner ng class namin, they think in terms of periods, di ba? Grading periods na hindi rin ka-sync ng semesters natin sa university. So it's because of that na nagkakaroon ng differences in terms of how quickly they respond, in terms even of priority of responding to you. Kasi we both obey different logics. Okay, so there's a depth deficit na na-establish natin that happened in remote field classes during the pandemic. Now, how do I make sense and tie up all of this together? Gusto kong balikan yung ating actor network theory. And I'd like to highlight two important actors that in one way or another have been instrumental kung bakit nagkaroon ng depth deficit during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm not one to say that the policy back then was bad or the online learning tools back then was bad. Kasi that's all we had. We were experimenting also. No? The university was experimenting. Our teachers were experimenting on different online learning tools. But it's just to say that when you say ang isang field class ay nagkulang sa pag-build ng rapport with stakeholders, may mga dahilan yun. There are actors that are interacting that have led to that phenomenon. So ito yung dalawang yun. For policy memos, I'll run through them quickly, but basically we have policies that did not quite permit yung field-based activities ng pandemic. In fact, they said na gawin natin exhaust all means to do it online first. Kapag hindi ma-exhaust, saka lang mag-face-to-face. So it was really parang discouraging people from doing field-based activities because we don't want the virus to spread. Yes, at the same time, the memos also indicated na walang attendance, with ang ating deadlines. All of these had implications in terms of the norms in classes. Kapag sinabi mo sa students, halimbawa, na walang attendance, it shifts the norms in classes. Kapag sinabi mo na walang deadlines, halimbawa, it also shifts the norms of classes. And then online learning tools. So we had a lot at our disposal. The UP system had subscriptions to different, to halimbawa Google Suite, to Zoom, to all these different online learning tools. But these also had implications to how we conduct field-based classes. So paano yun? Ano yun? No? How do I make sense of all of these together along with the actor network theory? Here it is. Okay, so stay with me. I'll be discussing this to you in detail one by one. So, housekeeping muna, no? If you see the legend here, ito yung mga actors natin, the ones in full black. So, ang full black lang dyan ay ito. And then you have in the framework, those words in gray, sila yung actor/actant natin. Ibig sabihin, they receive action, but they also do action. Diba yun yung definition ng actor and actant? And then yung actant, it's just a recipient of action. Yung mga words set in blue and bold, sila yung acts of translation. So ibig sabihin, paano nila binago, no? Paano sila nakipag-interact with the other actors and actants in this assemblage. And then lastly, yung red ones were the effects. Ano yung naging consequences ng mga yun? Now, policy memos are the only word in black Kasi sila yung parang main actor. Parang sila yung lead actor dito sa buong assemblage na to. Why? Kasi they direct action to almost everything. They direct action to this, they direct action to this, they direct action to this. Okay? Yung online learning tools are great. Actor and actor siya. Kasi while siya ay nagbibigay ng action sa iba, it also receives action from someplace else. So parang tayo nagmamapping dito, no? Very interesting. So at the middle, stay with me, no? At the middle, meron tayong field-based classes. Ito yan. So, para silang dalawang rounded squares, no? One is a class and one is the field, and then they're overlapping. Because that's basically the dynamic of a field-based class. One will not exist without the other. Kaya ka nagkakaroon ng gagawing output in class is because of the needs of the field. So sila yung nasa gitna. If you look at the framework, policy memos and online learning tools have both translated what a class is and what the field is. So I'll walk you through one by one. Paano translate ng isang policy memo, ng memoranda, ang classes? Through this. No? Hindi na nag-attendance in classes, wala nang strict na deadlines. So essentially, nabago yung norms in a class. At the same time, online tools have also translated what a class means because everything started to become text-based, video-based, internet-based. So itong buong to is a translated version of a class. This was not how we did classes pre-pandemic. At the same time, ganun din yung nangyari din sa field. Because of memos instructing us to keep things remotely, no physical contact with the field, therefore yung field had to be, we had to shift to virtual spaces to conduct fieldwork, right? And because of online learning tools, na-expand din yung notion natin of what a field is because of our wider reach through things like Messenger, through Zoom, and through emails. So, at the end of the day, what happened is these two actors have translated this. Now, is it a good thing? No? At saan papasok si depth deficit dyan? I argue that because classes and fields now are translated, bago na sila, di ba? Nagbago na sila because of these, nagkaroon sila ng tension because it's not how field-based classes were designed to work, di ba? They were designed to work together. They were designed not to work remotely. So nagkaroon ng tension and they're trying to, it's as if they're trying to translate each other as well. And in that process of having that tension, what was sacrificed was yung rapport between classes. Take note, hindi sila nagkaroon ng totoong conflict, but it's a conflict because they were both transformed by memos and by online learning tools. And because of that, na-sacrifice yung rapport that we expect classes and fields to deeply have, therefore, in turn, creating that depth deficit in a field-based class. So in essence, I showed you this just to create an elaborate mapping kung paano nangyari yung depth deficit. Because the ANT is attuned, like I mentioned, to a step-by-step process kung paano nagkakaroon ng isang social phenomenon. If your social phenomenon is that there is a depth deficit in a remote field-based class, ito yung mga underlying reasons, processes, and actors and actants that have been responsible for that. So, yun yung framework that I used for this research. Now, the last part of my research would be implications. So, anong implications ito therefore? Sir, masyado mang theoretical yan. There are actually implications to this. The first is, it's impossible to let go of remote field instruction because we all have these tools already. May Zoom tayo, meron tayong Messenger, may emails. And they were reinforced by the COVID-19 pandemic. So given that they won't go away, it would always be nice, according to the research, to still have or to still be mindful about the pitfalls and limitations of virtual tools. They cannot provide you the depth of rapport that you can have if you did things in person. So kung gagamit ka ng virtual tools, make sure that it is accompanied by face-to-face interactions with the community as well. Okay? So kung magde-data gathering ka halimbawa remotely, make sure na may periodic visits ka pa din dun sa community na yun. Second, lessen the tension between the class and the field. So I mentioned earlier, magkaiba ng logic na ino-obey ang classes at yung field. And what you can do is to try to make their occupational and temporal logics more connected. You can do this by co-planning with the community kung ano yung inyong gagawin, ano yung pwede ninyong pagtulungan together, so that hindi nagiging taliwas sa plano ng isa't isa yung mga ideas nyo. Baka kasi yung idea ng class ay iba dun sa hinihingi ng community. So to make them more aligned with each other, we encourage that kind of close planning with the community beforehand. We actually did this earlier this semester with a partner community, and so far natutuwa po kami dun sa results with our partners too. And then last po would be to explore the use of ANT in theorizing about the pandemic, specifically pandemic learning. So ANT would allow us to not make generalizations or big excuses or big explanations about what the pandemic did to learning, but it allows you to look at things more granularly, pay attention to how things this time might be different from how another thing happened. So itong nangyari sa classes I observed probably had not happened to other classes, for example, in different parts of the Philippines, but an ANT type of approach is best suited to obtain yung mga ganong granular na experiences ng mga estudyante at ng mga faculty members, which I invite future researchers to be able to take up to. So yun lamang po ang aking talk. I'm sorry if I extended by a bit, but thank you for listening, and I will be welcoming comments shortly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, EJ, for your engaging lecture at ang malinaw na pagpapaliwanag doon sa actor network theory. Ayan. So at this point, we will be proceeding with the open forum. You may use the Zoom chat box to type in your questions or comments, or you may raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged before you can directly ask your question to EJ. So kung may mga questions po tayo, chat box, or you can turn on your mic to ask questions kay EJ. Meron po ba? Siguro umpisan ko na lang yung tanong, EJ, habang nag-iisip yung ating audience. So yung tanong ko lang ay, sasabi mo kasi kanina ay yung mga community yung nag-identify ng mga issue, tapos kayo or yung class yung mag-iisip ng medium kung paano yon i-translate into a development communication material. So I'm curious kasi nung panahon ng pandemic, ano usually yung mga ganoong mga issues yung kanila inilalapit sa inyo na gusto nilang gawa ng material?
Thanks po, Miani, po for the question. No? So, for example po, dun sa partner school namin dito sa Las Bañas, isa sa mga na-identify nila, kasi di ba yung schools, basic ed nung pandemic ay nag-shift to modular. So, ibig sabihin, yung students nila ay tinuturuan ng mga parents at home, and yung mga teachers were just there to check yung mga outputs ng mga bata. Ngayon, ang sabi po nung teachers na ka-partner namin dun sa school na yon ay yung mga parents minsan ng mga bata also have a hard time na turuan yung mga anak nila kasi kailangan nila ng parang refresher lessons din on things like mathematics, on vocabulary, etc. Kasi mga professionals na yung mga parents nila, di ba? Or may instances po na talagang hindi din nakapag-aral yung parents. So, ang request po nila ay parang supplemental materials for parents na parang binibigyan sila ng parang crash course or refresher courses on the lessons of their elementary level na children. So, yun po yung isang example. We did that for DevCom 144 class, media-based learning system. So, yung students ko po, ganun yung outputs na binigay nila. May ilang instances naman po na ang ginagawa ng iba-iba po kasi, no, ang ginagawa ng ibang classes, halimbawa in participatory development journalism, they um, they partner with an organization and then they co-develop a story, no, na kung saan yung, or parang they co-develop parang output na kung saan nakukwento ng community partner yung kanilang mga experiences to a wider audience. So kaya po siya participatory development journalism kasi hindi siya parang yung extractive lang na journalism, pero we see to it na bahagi yung community dun sa storytelling process nung feature article or documentary na yun. So yun po, Ma'am Yani, yung ilan sa outputs nung pandemic. Pero mostly po talaga ay remote yung coordination and even yung turnover ng outputs are purely virtual. So yung outputs po ng students namin ay electronic din.
Thanks, EJ. Okay, so may other questions po ba tayo mula sa audience? Questions? Yes, may nag-raise ng hand. Yes, please.
So hello and good evening po. May tanong po ako regarding doon po sa after network theory. Di ba po may mga classes po doon? Yung, do you consider the class, yung students po, di ba sa loob ng klase may students, teachers, etc. po. Yung pag-analyze niyo po ba doon is, kinonsider niyo po yung, kunyari, ito sa student, ganito yung niya, sitwasyon niya. Like may socio-economic difference yung bawat klase na yun, ganito yung sitwasyon ng teacher. Like kasama pa rin po ba yun sa ANT? Like kasi nga very granular siya. So yung mga outside factors na to, kasama po ba yun sa analyze po sa niyo po, study niyo po? Or dapat kailangan po yun kapag nag-enforce po ng ANT po sa methodology po?
Thank you, Nicole. That's a very interesting question. No? Actually, alam mo, yung from what I read sa ANP, ang possible danger niya is you don't know when to stop. Kasi parang you're tracing, di ba, parang so many actors that bring about a phenomenon. Saan ka titigil? So, ang actor network theory, actually, the studies that I've read are just trying to focus on a particular assemblage in that network. So in my research, ang focus ko ay yung legal and technological na assemblage. But if halimbawa ang naging focus natin ay like familial relations, halimbawa, yun yung naging parang unit of analysis. Mag-iiba yung perspective mo doon sa paano nangyayari ang field-based class. Because then you would have to consider what happens at home. Not only for the student, but also what happens to the teacher at home. What happens to the people in the community. So, in my research, no, hindi ko masyadong napagtuunan yun ng pansin because the assemblage that I focused on is on policy and yung technological framework that they use. Pero, it's very much open to other, to looking at the other assemblages in that network. So yun yung limitations ng research. So if you plan halimbawa to create a research related to this in the future, then it will depend on you kung anong assemblage yung pagtutunan. Because as a researcher, again, you can only do so much. But yun, to be transparent then, I really just focused on the policy and on the technology that they used.
Okay, salamat sa nagtanong. Kay EJ, may question tayo sa Zoom chat box. So from Joycel, field instruction is really an interesting method. May I know the challenges that your paper encountered regarding ethics, getting consent, etc., knowing that you interacted with teachers and perhaps indirectly pupils?
Ang ganda po nung tanong. Okay. Nung nag-thesis ako, nung data gathering ko, actually, isa ako sa mga unang sumalang dun sa Research Ethics Board ng CSSP. So, at the time, no, isa sa mga naging feedback sa akin nung Ethics Board was, you are going to be researching students from the college. If that's so, ikaw ay teacher dun sa college na yon. So hindi ba nagwi-wield ka unnecessarily ng parang power over them that might influence yung una, yung data gathering method mo, tapos padalawa, how you interpret the data. So it was actually a good comment, no? And nung pinag-usapan namin ng advisor ko, ang naging response namin was, actually in any social science research, to some degree as a researcher, may influence ka doon sa pag-phrase ng question, sometimes undue influence doon sa pag-gather mo ng data. But what you have to do is to try to reflect that in the write-up. So it can be a limitation and mention na if ang magre-research halimbawa dito is a student, not a teacher anymore, or someone not from the college, someone from outside, then probably the results might be different or the interpretation, the discussion might be different. But as it stands, it's still a valid research output from a valid researcher. They just have to mention na ito yung possible na shortcomings ng research. So that's how we address it, no? By making it explicit in the draft na may possibility na gano'n yung mangyayari. So yun po, yun yung isa sa mga naging feedback nung ethics review. Pero parang other than that, wala naman na masyado. I think ang isa lang na note ko is dun sa informed consent forms, especially if you're going to ask possibly mga questions that might cause parang negative reaction on the part of your participants. You have to be clear about ano yung guidelines na gagawin mo after that. So in my case, parang naglagay ako doon ng if may instance na makaramdam sila ng distress. Kasi probably the question might be stressful for them to answer. Then ano yung mga safeguards na pwedeng gawin ni researcher? Is there an office, a university facility that you can refer them to if that happens? So yun. Yung ethics actually kasi it's not really trying to hinder you from doing research. It's just formalizing it, giving you structure in case something untoward might happen on your end or on the end of the research participant. So yun lang, be clear lang about safeguards for the participants.
Okay, thank you, EJ. I think my follow-up question ulit is si Joycel. So did you have prior image, perhaps possible outcomes of your research in mind before your field instructions? So did it change in the process, and what did you realize that perhaps not included in your research questions?
Actually, again, an interesting question. Kasi it was the pandemic. I was doing the research during the pandemic. And alam niyo nung pandemic, we're kind of like alienated from each other kasi we were just doing our own things. So ako halimbawa as a teacher, I'm just focused on being a teacher, being able to deliver my lectures, etc. Kinakamusta ko yung mga students ko, etc. Pero alam mo yung hindi tayo ganon kalakat sa experiences ng students because of how alienated, separated we are from each other. As opposed to kung nangyayari ito in person, na mas nakakamusta mo regularly yung student. If they have problems, they can, pwede ka nilang puntahan readily. I think this research allowed me to also take the perspective of the students more deeply. Kasi the pandemic has caused that kind of alienation from each other. And ito yung naging opportunity for me para mas makakausap ng mga estudyante about their experiences during the pandemic, which we have as teachers, I think in general, not had that much opportunity to do. So yun lang. And interestingly, ang daming perspectives about how they adapted to the pandemic, ano yung mga tools na ginagamit nila, how they animate interactions with each other online. Ang dami nilang mga pakulo na even ako, dala-dala ko hanggang ngayon, natutuwa. So, yun po.
Thanks, EJ. Sige, one last question. Sige, meron pa akong question kay EJ. Kasi doon sa iyong framework, very crucial at sabi mo nga, major actor itong policy memo. at based sa ating mga experiences ay hindi rin stable or nagbabago yung policy memo. May mga policy memo na next week, the following week, nagbabago din siya. So naka-apekto ba yan doon sa framework na na-develop mo?
Actually, ma'am, opo. No? Kasi at the start of the pandemic, parang ito yung guidelines for field instruction. Pero for example, pagdating ng 2022, nagkaroon ng provision for limited face-to-face classes. Pero parang marami pa rin hinihingi, no, from both the students who will engage in limited face-to-face and the institutions who will offer them. So parang hindi din lahat ng departments, ng colleges ay nag-implement ng face-to-face because of a lot of requirements. So ito yung mga kailangan completely vaccinated yung bata, kailangan meron silang lugar na tutuluyan kapag nagko-community work sila. May instance na kailangan may nasa bubble lang sila na housing para hindi ma-ensure na sila ay hindi ma-expose masyado doon sa community. So, may mga pagbabago po over time doon sa policies. And I think natural part naman siya of dealing with the pandemic. Side note, actually doon sa research ko po, lumabas din na isa sa difficulty of conducting field instruction was that yung pagbabago nga ng mga policies outside of the university. So di ba minsan ECQ, tas mamaya MECQ, GCQ. So ang hirap mag-adapt every now and then kasi prepared ka na, halimbawa na mag-limited face-to-face, biglang nag-ECQ ulit. So because of those, parang I think it was safest for universities to adopt a remote mode para hindi ganun kalaki yung disruptions. So yun po, yun yung changes sa policy over time that I saw when I was doing the research.
Okay, sige. Maraming salamat, EJ. Any other question? Last question po para sa ating speaker, para kay EJ. Okay, so mukhang wala na sa ating mga audience na magtatanong. So maraming salamat po sa mga nagtanong at sa mga tugon na binigay sa atin ni EJ. So thank you everyone for this insightful discussion. Allow me to present the certificate of appreciation to our speaker. Okay, so certificate of appreciation is given to Elijah Jesse Pine for the valuable insights and expertise shared as virtual research speaker for the talk, depth, deficit, rapport building, and remote field instruction in university classes during the COVID-19 pandemic as part of the Geo Lecture Series 2024 held on September 27, 2024, na nakalagda po ang ating chair ng ating departamento, si Christian Carlos Sagin, at ang presidente ng Philippine Geographical Society, si Emmanuel Garcia. So, maraming salamat, Sir EJ. And okay, salamat. And at this point, I'd like to call Dr. Joseph Paris, faculty member of the UP Department of Geography and one of the conveners of this Geo Lecture Series, to give us his closing remarks. Sir Joseph?
Let me repeat what I just said. Thank you very much, Jens, for moderating, and thanks a lot, EJ, for this wonderful presentation that totally touched on a lot of geographic aspects that we also study and learn. And it's interesting to see convergences, intersections, and points of departures, really, that show us how field can be such a very volatile and such a space beyond the geographical space. I think one of the questions that was asked here that was not quite answered from Jade Okab was the redefinition of the word field. Actually, there is a French sociologist, Pierre Bourdieu, who managed to call field a social space, right? So it redefines field more than just geographical in nature, but it could be about the site of interaction, which of course EJ has done, albeit in a different fashion, because it was not on site, and it shows us very different kinds of challenges. Although I'm just going to say something about the closing remarks, I'm just going to comment a few things about the presentation as well. One of which is the valence of power. I think Joycel was able to ask this question. Sorry about the noise. It's starting to get busy here, thunder-wise in UP. Um, where was I? I was talking about the valence of power, and that was, I think, asked by Joycel in one of the questions. This is where the positionality comes in, right? That's why it's important to always put that in your research. A social scientist, or those who are not social scientists but would like to engage in research involving human subjects, you have to include positionality. Positionality is an acknowledgement of you as a researcher, what you get out of it. There's no conflict of interest, what you really learn from this. And in a sense, this positionality tells people about the kind of findings that you have. So in a sense, EJ's own findings may differ from someone who approaches it from a perspective of, say, linguistics, right? Or economics, totally different kind of approach to understand remote learning. So that's one of the things that I think we should do, aside from the fact that we should not do extractive research, which is always come back when you're done with your research, always come back to the community, not just to thank them for the data, but to make them realize that they are co-partners and co-creators of knowledge in the thesis process. Finally, I'd like to mention the aspect of ethics. One of the reasons why ethics is, sorry, maingay talaga. One of the reasons why ethics review board is in place in CSSP in particular, and hopefully all research involving human subjects, is because it protects the respondents as well. The first time it was introduced, mostly biomedical research to test humans about the effectivity, the effectiveness of certain medicine without regard to their health. So in the sense, the ERB is a way to safeguard them. Then it branches itself into the social sciences and the humanities to say that when you do research, you should always make sure that privacy is engaged. When you don't want to talk about certain things, you do not push, but always get freely given answers from people. So and that was covered pretty much by EJ as well. And maybe as a postscript, I'd like to mention that two of my colleagues in 2020 also handled field work for the first time. And just like what EJ has mentioned, they too were trying to firm up their field methods pedagogy during shaky grounds, because that was the era that was pretty much the height of the lockdown in 2020. And so when they did that, it was really a recalibration of, we're not going to do, it's an acknowledgement that we're not going to do perfect research or field work, but let us at least try all avenues to make sure that there is a kind of engagement with it. And that's why it's an interesting thing that EJ started what we think about field to begin with. And what comes to mind when the word field work comes in, and some of you answered a lot of things, because that's what we get from field work, right? But there are also advantages of doing field work via online, because it allows you to have a much more modular approach. You can learn at your own pace, and you can learn other information you cannot just find in a more face-to-face setting. So thank you very much, EJ. Thanks for all these provocations and intellectual discussions of the actor network theory, for sharing with us your field work. And as we are slowly going back to more on-site field research, we can always reflect and look back to the times. What are the lessons that we learned from remote learning, and how it can even more enrich our understanding, or in maximizing learning to students, as well as the faculty who are themselves perpetual learners. So thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, Sir Joe. Okay, so video documentation of our past lectures are all stored in the UP Department of Geography YouTube channel, so you can visit our channel to watch them, as well as other recorded events of the PGS and the Department of Geography.